Hey, JD here. Welcome to the Mead House. You know, over the past several years, we've brought you over 150 episodes of mead making education, information, and entertainment. More than 100 guests have stopped by the Mead House, professional mead makers, medal winning home mead makers, competition organizers, experts on yeast and honey, and brewers just like you and me have all visited to share their knowledge. Hey, the Mead House is produced for home mead makers and brewers looking for a bit of inspiration and information from the many guests and discussions we have here at the house. You can help support the Mead House by joining the Mead House Keyholder Club on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com and search for the Mead House. There's also a link in the show notes. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a keyholder. We've teamed up with some great companies to provide thank you gifts for your support. So get on over to Patreon, join the Mead House Keyholder Club, and get your own set of keys to the Mead House. You can listen to the Mead House podcast with your favorite player, and be sure to rate us 5 stars on iTunes or your favorite listening venue. The Mead House, mead making entertainment you just don't want to miss. Hey, welcome to the Mead House, and thanks for listening to... Geez, here we go again. 180 episodes, Jeff. Dude, can you believe this?
Yeah, no, that's... God, how long have we been rolling now? Like 4 odd years?
Well, almost 4 years, I think.
4 or 5?
It only seems like 150 to me.
150 to you. Oh, my God. 180 episodes in the can after tonight. Hey, thanks for joining us here on this episode. You know, I was just remodeling the kitchen when Jeff and Ryan showed up. I'm JD Webb, and hey, I'll probably have to rake the backyard after they leave. But hey, the Mead House podcast, we're everywhere on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and now on Amazon Music. So hey, Alexa. Oh, God. Did I really say that? Play the Mead House podcast, Sweet Pea. Hey, check the front page of the website for more locations. I can hear my Alexa is in the kitchen, actually. And she's talking to me right now. Hey, in this episode, in 2010, he founded the first commercial meadery in New York State and opened the first meadery in New York City. His meads have been embraced by the natural wine community and are served at some of the finest restaurants and bars in New York City. He likes the archaeological and historical aspects of mead making, including foraging for ingredients locally from Enlightenment meads. Here last on episode 166, returning to us this episode, welcome back to the show, Raphael Lyon. And then in segment 2, hey, has anybody done a vegetable melomel? I'll have a comment on that a little bit later. I know someone who did, and I got the last bottle of it, and I turned it into a sauce, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But carrots from my garden and an empty carboy. Is this madness or inspiration? Hey, we'll talk about that. And then also, are you intimidated to retry a mead that you did before and just, like me? I mean, come on, the coffee mead, we've talked that to death here at the Mead House. How about the pumpkin mead that I did a while back? Never to try again. Is there anything that you would like to go back to but feel like you're intimidated by it? We're going to talk about that in segment 2, and of course segment 3, social. What are we calling this now? Social media, social club, the social club, social
interaction or social club. I don't think we've sub on this, but we're getting there.
We're getting there. Hey, this is where we try to answer questions from mead makers with no formal expertise other than what we've experienced in our own brew house. All that and more here at the Mead House. But first, hey, thanks to all the Mead House key holders who help keep the Mead House podcast free. You too can become a Mead House key holder and help support the show for as little as $2 a month. We've got some great thank you gifts to send out to you. Get on over to patreon.com, search for the Mead House, or just click on the link in the show notes. What are we drinking tonight? One of my favorite bourbons, actually, this is my wife's favorite bourbon. This is Colonel E.H. Taylor, small batch. bottled in bond. Now, the bottled in bond designation mandates that brands clear some rigorous hurdles. The spirit must be aged for at least 4 years and bottled at precisely 100 proof or 50% ABV. It's got to be made by one distiller at a single distillery in one season and then aged in a bonded warehouse. The whiskeylibrary.com, you can read more about it there. The Bottled in Bond Act of 1897, an act to allow the bottling of distilled spirits in bond, was a set of regulations defined by the 54th Congress of the United States. So, hey, even Congress gets involved in bourbon making, bourbon distilling. E.H. Taylor. My word. Oh, this is good stuff. My God. I mean, you can really go deep with this. I get the cigar smoke. There's a heavy leather chair in there in the background. Some really dark fruits like dark cherries, dried fruits. I'm getting a lot of caramel, some vanillins up front. Oh my word, this finish is really nice. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm. Oh my God, this is really good. Colonel E.H. Taylor, small batch, bottled in bond. Get yourself a bottle of this stuff and you won't go back. Okay, so in my other hand, I got this box today. And I wasn't quite sure. It said the Mead House, J.D. Webb. It had my address on it. I thought, who's sending stuff to me at the Mead House? And lo and behold, I opened it up, and it's a box of this Dragon Con from Monk's Meadery. And I want to say his name is John Ryan. Help me out with his name. Justin Schoendorf, I believe. Justin Schoendorf. And he was describing this the last time he was on the show. I did not expect him to even send any of this to me, and I'm telling you, wow. My word. This is passion fruit, hibiscus, and dragon fruit. If you know what a dragon fruit is, just Google it. I'm not going to sit here and go through the whole thing about explaining it to you. Just Google it. I mean, it's the weirdest looking thing you've ever seen, but I'm telling you, this is dry. It's got a nice fruity flavor to it. I can taste the hibiscus even in it. The passion fruit comes through. A little bit of sweetness up front, but it finishes nice and dry, nicely carved. Justin, dude, you blew this out of the water. I mean, this is awesome stuff. Oh, my Lord. Oh, wow. That is really, really good stuff. Thank you so much, Justin, for thinking about me and sending me a box of Dragon's Nectar, Dragon Con mead. So, Jeff, I know you got a box, too.
Yeah. I am, by coincidence, also having some Dragon's Nectar, and man, when I was reading the ingredients, I was a little bit iffy. Truth be told, passion fruit, dragon fruit, I'm a little on. I mean, they're nice tropical flavors, but they don't blow me out of the water. They don't really do a lot for me. I was kind of like, okay, well, this could be good. This could be all right. I liked what they made up last time, so I cracked one open after letting it, chill out in the refrigerator a little bit. Oh man, this is good stuff.
Isn't it?
The tropical fruit flavor, that tartness from the hibiscus, kind of just toning that down a little bit. They're really, really well balanced together. It's dry and bubbly the way I like it. I mean, this is really, really good. So yeah, Justin, knock this out of the park. Thank you so much for sending this our way. This is excellent stuff.
Good stuff. Did you happen to have another cup?
I do, as a matter of fact. Since we're talking about stuff that we're a little intimidated to try again, and I have a project in mind, I cracked open one of the bottles of Higher Ground that I'm saving from Sap House, so I'm enjoying that in my second cup. And
That's
now that I've had a few coffee meads, I think I can approach this a little bit more fairly than I approached my original one. I did not initially like my coffee mead because I was expecting something more akin to a cup of coffee.
right.
And, the way I take coffee is black and fresh out of the pot.
Like God intended, right?
Right.
Yep.
I like my coffee to taste like coffee, thank you very much.
Yep.
And this tastes like coffee, but this doesn't taste like a cup of black coffee. It's got sweetness. It's got some of that like the tannin character and some of the fruitiness of the bean. It's very interesting, but it's not a cup of black coffee. So now that I kind of understand what a coffee mead can be, and as opposed to just coffee, I think I'm a little bit more ready to try this again. But we'll get back to that in segment 2. So
yeah, good stuff. I love it. I've had it too, and the number of coffee meads that I've had from various places. That's probably one of the better ones that I've had. And like you say, I mean, it's not like drinking a cup of coffee, but it has all of the things that I like about a good cup of coffee.
Right.
It's a nice dessert type of drink. I could have a little glass of that with some brie and some maybe some fig preserves over the top, and a nice cracker.
Yeah.
I could drink that with that. Good stuff. Ryan, you always come up with something unusual, something different, something out of the ordinary. What is it tonight?
Yeah. So, last winter, I started drinking my health tonic. I think I started telling people it was, or a little mead tail that I called For My Health.
Yep.
And a big part of that was elderberry syrup, which I had made elderberry syrup and then I had made into some mead tails. Well, I made a large batch of elderberry syrup on Sunday, and it's it's good for cold and flu season. Although I don't know if anybody gets the cold or the flu anymore, or if it's just all that other thing now. But anyway, taking a chance here that the cold and the flu are still around, I made a batch, and elderberry syrup it's a lot like chili or sofrito, or JD'd call it mirepoix. I call it sofrito, which is everybody makes it a little bit different. They all kind of add little things here and there. I mean, you hear elderberry syrup, and you might just think, oh, it's just elderberries. Yeah, it can be, but a lot of people doctor them up a little bit. Add a little ginger, add a little cinnamon, add a little wild cherry bark, add a little whatever. So I was going through, and you guys know I'm kind of famous for my pantry clean out meads and my freezer clean out meads, that kind of thing. I was going through, like a Tupperware box here to like keep everything in to keep it fresh, and I had little bits of ingredients that I was just kind of cleaning out. So I had gotten over the last couple of years, I've gotten a couple of big shipments from Mountain Rose Herbs, and that's where I got the elderberries.
Mm-hmm.
And I had done some pretty precise measuring when I had done a little bit of this or that and things. And I had little pinches left over, and I decided let's do a clean out here with the elderberry syrup.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of put all these little pinches of things in and made a very nice elderberry syrup, and then worked that now into the mead tail. So I've got some elderberry syrup in here. I've got a red, kind of a mixed red piment in here, and then just because I wanted to lighten it up a little bit, I've got some seltzer water in there as well, just to give it a little bit of bubble and just kind of just lighten it up a little bit to make sure I can make it through the end of the show without slurring the words too badly.
I love it, man. You always come up with some of the weirdest things.
Hey, it's for my health.
For
That's what we're doing here. It's
for my health. For my health.
Yeah.
I dig it.
Well, as JD said, coming back to the mead house is the Brooklyn mead maker himself, Raphael Lyon. He joined us last time. I think it was
episode 166.
Episode 166. So working backwards, we can figure out when that one is. He's kind of a Renaissance man, but the last time he was on the show, we talked all about his natural wild fermented meads, and and some of the other kitchen or I should say cooking things he'd done as well. I think he had a fermented garlic or something that was on his recipe list at the time that we were talking just a little bit about. Welcome back to the show, Raphael, and what is in your cup tonight?
Oh, I'm drinking lemon water.
Lemon water.
It's hot lemon water.
Oh my God. If that doesn't take the cake, I'm telling you. Oh my God, lemon water. Oh, Raphael, dude, I'm telling you.
You mentioned something earlier that I was like really ring a bell, which was this pumpkin mead. And I remember when I was a kid, I had this book of Sinbad the Sailor. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Stories? And there's a really funny kind of episode in there where he gets captured by this like kind of tiny dwarf man who sits on his. I can't believe like the detail. I remember this. But get ready. This little man sits on his shoulders and wraps his legs around his neck, and he can't get him off. Right. And he makes Sinbad like get wood for him and cook him dinner, and he's just like a servant. And the way that Sinbad finally gets him off is that he makes a pumpkin wine, because there's pumpkins. I mean, they're translated as pumpkins. I don't know what they actually were, right? Because this is a Middle Eastern story, but he gets these kind of gourds and somehow ferments them, which I guess means he put water in them or something. And he gets this like creature to get drunk. That's how he gets off. He gets him drunk on the pumpkin wine.
Oh wow!
So there you go. Yeah.
Oh my God.
What state are you guys in? Where are you doing this podcast from?
I'm in Southern California. I'm in Sherman Oaks, Southern California. Typically known as Mead House Southwest. And Ryan is up near Minneapolis, just outside of Minneapolis. We call him Mead House North. And then Jeff is somewhere in Kansas City. Call it Kansas or call it Missouri, either one. But we're spread out all over the place.
Oh, okay. Cool. I just was trying to visualize this whole thing.
Oh yeah.
So you're used to working remotely. I guess you're all set up for it.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Carry on, Ryan.
Sorry.
Lemon water.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
my.
Exactly.
All right.
So how are things since the last time we talked?
Wow. When was that? Pre-COVID? Must have been, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't even remember. Well, let's see. We're considered essential services here, so we've been working through. My main assistant, who I've been lucky in that both my first main assistant, he had already had COVID, so he had antibodies and stuff, so that made working around easier.
Yeah.
Because it's just really usually just me and another person doing production, and then he went to Vermont. Lost him. He's working for he's working for a winery up there, and I got a new assistant. She's great, and she also had COVID, so I've been lucky.
Wow.
I can kind of stay at work and be safe, and it's all right.
Yeah.
But then it's New York, so it got weird here. We had to. We have like some of the lowest rates in the country, so it's not so crazy here right now. But we closed the bar, opened up the outside street, built this huge cinder block thing, so everybody can hang out outside, and that's been working pretty well actually. And now we're going to have a hot pot. We're making hot pot. So people can hang out in the winter and eat hot soup and drink mead and have fun.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, be safe.
Excellent. Have you had any trouble sourcing any of your ingredients for your meads or your natural wines at all through all of this?
Well, it's interesting. You may remember that I'm what you call I have a farm winery license. So we use local ingredients. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons to use local ingredients is because you're not relying on, there's a whole number of reasons to use local ingredients. They help the local economy. They help your local farmers. You cut down on greenhouse gases. You're not transporting stuff all over the world. You've got an ability to go talk to your farmers and know what the ingredients are from and all this stuff. But the other thing is it's short supply lines. So, if things get ugly or UPS breaks or, red states don't want to talk to blue states or no one wants to drive across the country or there's a gas shortage or whatever, pick your zombie apocalypse. You want your ingredients coming locally, right? And so for the most part, we haven't really had an issue because I have very close relationships with our suppliers. The only exception is we do use occasionally some herbs that are not grown here, and one of them is rose hips. So rose hips we got from an herb provider out west, and they're back ordered weeks. So that's slowed us down. Another weird thing that's happened is a lot of bars were bottling all our cocktails. Yeah. So everybody's scrounging around for these tiny little 187 bottles. Right. And, I'll call up Waterloo. I mean, when you get into doing, we're small. We're still a small winery by anybody's standards. But, when we order stuff, we order pallets of them, right? We're not ordering a case. Mm-hmm. So in the Northeast, there's the main bottle supplier is called Waterloo. They supply all the wineries from Finger Lakes. They got in they said something insane, 10,000 pallets of these little bottles, and they were gone in a month.
Yeah. Mason jars out here have gone up in price too. So I hear you.
Yeah. But we were talking maybe about thinking about mead making as part of a general self-reliance ideology, right? I mean, and that's certainly where I started. When I started making alcohol, we have preppers now and a whole culture of self-reliance and some of that goes back to the homestead movement in the 60s. And it's a continual thing that happens in the history of America. There are movements to go kind of quote back to the land by people who didn't necessarily grow up there. And in my case, I kind of came of age around Y2K. People remember that, which was this kind of, moment where people suddenly started paying attention to the supply chains, where we get our food and electricity and how sort of fragile they are.
Let's stop right there. Remind, we would probably have some younger
Oh, okay.
listeners out there who may not know what that whole scenario was all about.
Right. So this is where I date myself, right? Now you know exactly how old I am. So there is this concern, and the thing about it was is that it wasn't like some kind of weird conspiracy. This was a kind of a real thing.
Oh, right,
yeah. So a lot of the computers that were running at the time were built in the 80s, and they didn't know what they were doing, and they just literally hadn't considered this sort of small problem of like the rollover on the date.
1999. Well, yeah, what happens in 1990?
Yeah, I mean,
and
to go back a step,
Yeah.
it was the digits for years were done in 2 digits. So, 1998 was just represented as 98. And, now you think, well, why is that a problem? I mean, my phone in my hand is, 256 gigs or something like that, right?
Yeah, right.
But back then, I mean, 2 bits was a huge deal. And if you could save 2 bits on every date, so if you had a spreadsheet, and you could save that on, by removing 2 digits, that was a big deal. So people were worried, like, oh my gosh, are banks going to think that it's 1900 and not 2000? And what's going to happen to my bank account? Or what's going to happen to my mortgage? Or what's going to happen to the power grid? Or what's going to happen? There was a funny movie at the time, date yourself even more, myself. Mike Judge, the creator of Beavis and Butthead, had the movie Office Space.
Yeah.
And people know him now, I think, because he also did the show Silicon Valley. But back when he was getting started, there was this TV channel called MTV. And nobody knows what that is anymore.
Selves further by saying we watched MTV when they showed music.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
And he had this movie called Office Space, and that was the guy's job. The guy's job in Office Space was to update, computer software for Y2K. And he talked about how boring his job was in a couple of scenes, and it was kind of funny.
So obviously it sort of worked out, but there was, this. I guess everybody who could program got a job that year, and they seem to have fixed it in time. But, me, I was out, trying to be a farmer. And around that period, I was like, well, this is a good time as any to sort of figure out, I was young, but it was like, what does it take to feed a family of 5? Like, what does that feel like? What kind of things were you growing in? At the time, I was doing a lot of heirloom crops, so I was growing in the methods and also the seeds and stuff that would have been used on that land, which was an old farm to begin with, but when the farm was started 200 years ago. So, and that's also when I started making alcohol and foraging and a lot of those things. But there is something really good about when you make alcohol. It's not just about like engaging with this really interesting biological process, which is fun, and chemistry, which is fun, but it's also about not having to go to the liquor store, right? I mean, ultimately, it's like you can just make alcohol yourself, and lots of people do all the time in all kinds of places. And I think one of the reasons mead is so interesting to me is because I think, and I'm just my poor, lowly, humble opinion, but it's so fundamentally different from beer in the sense that it's not like these classes of meads and these types of meads and these recipes of meads. They're all kind of fake. Like they've been kind of formalized like in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. For the most part, mead is just like what people did with honey and stuff that grew around them, right? And whether that was fruit or herbs, they'd find some way to make it bitter, they'd find some way to make it acidic, and they'd add honey to it. And you can still treat mead making from that perspective. And no matter, that's one of the reasons I asked you where you guys live, but whether you live in in the West or in the North or the South, you have a specific region that you live in. You've got specific plants there, and through mead making, you can go out and learn about your natural environment and use those. You know, I'm always an advocate for like people to like stop ordering stuff on the internet and like just go for a walk.
Yeah.
Especially at the scale that most home winemakers are doing, which is like 5 gallons. You know, it doesn't take much. You can go out and get some birch bark. You know, a few handfuls of that will go a long way. You know, there's all kinds of evergreens everywhere. They're interesting. You've got all these wild roses. I mean, there's all these grasses. All that stuff can go in alcohol. None of it's going to kill you.
You talk like you were born when I was born 100 years too late. I
know exactly when I would have liked to be born. I would have liked to be born around 1890.
You think? I mean, back to the earth and back. I mean, oh my God, yes, dude. I'm telling you, you're barking right up my tree.
So, Raphael, before we get too far in a tangent, I do have a follow-up question from one of our listeners from your last appearance. And it was actually a question that I was asked to pose to you the first time, and the listener told me I did a horrible job of relaying it. And so now I'll reiterate now that you're back on, and hope our listener was patient enough. You do natural fermentations or natural or wild fermented, I should say, fermentations. And the question was, how do you feel confident, or how do you feel in that the yeast that is going to take off in your meads has enough alcohol tolerance to get it to where you want it to go? So I guess, to say that another way, out by JD, a couple hours north of JD in Santa Barbara, County, there are a lot of winemakers who do ferment their wine naturally, with the yeast that's on the grape skins. But talking to those guys, they said, they've been doing that year after year after year, and they know what to predict, and they know how the yeast that collects on those skins in that particular vineyard, how it's going to react. It seems like with some of your meads, you've got, dandelion meads and rosehip meads and cherry meads and apples and all kinds of stuff. And how do you, just feel confident that or succeed in that, whatever kind of wild yeast is on that stuff is going to get you to the finish line of where you want to go, where you want to end up with your gravity, or your I guess your final gravity.
Okay, so these are all good questions. I'm going to start by I want to clarify one thing around. I'm very particular about my terminologies, right? So let's natural is a kind of messy term, because obviously you can go buy yeast from a store and put it in some mead, and there's nothing particularly unnatural about that, right? I wouldn't say that's not a natural process. Right. It's all natural. When I use the word like natural winemaking, it comes with all this very particular baggage from the grape wine world. And what they're really talking about there is like low intervention, which means there's 180 chemicals you can put in wine that you don't have to label. All kinds of colorings and acid changers and all that stuff. So they don't want to do any of that stuff. And they also generally are going to use spontaneous fermentation. Now, again, I want to clarify that also. Spontaneous fermentation is different than using wild yeast, right? You can call up a yeast supplier and buy wild yeast, which means that there was a yeast that they identified somewhere that they liked off a tree or wherever they get it, and they'll multiply it and sell it to you. Spontaneous fermentation is a little bit different, and the reason is and this is going to try and answer your question at the same time. Spontaneous fermentation implies a few things. One, there are many yeasts going to be in this brew, right? Because there's all kinds of yeast out there, and there's all kinds of bacteria, and they're all coming in with the honey. So you don't want to think about this as like you're pitching a wild yeast. You want to think about this as like a kind of ecosystem with a lot of variation in it. And so the first thing that's going to happen is some of those yeasts that have lower alcohol tolerance, and I can't pronounce, and I won't bore you with their actual names, but there's a bunch that kind of die out around 5 or 6% alcohol. But they're tasty. Dry out, right? And then the kind of more regular yeasts that can handle more alcohol, they will start to dominate. But there's still going to be quite a bit of genetic variation within that group. And as the alcohol level increases, remember, these are going through multiple generations. They're self-selecting. The population of yeast should evolve. If they're healthy, if they've got oxygen, if they've got nutrients, if they're basically not too stressed out, et cetera, they should be able to handle quite high alcohol levels.
Right.
I just fermented something that went to 15% ABV with wild yeast. I didn't want it to go to 15%. I don't recommend people make 15% alcohol meads, but it happened. I didn't. It was hard to measure the gravity because I was using whole cherries and made some mistakes, basically, and it came out too strong. That was wild yeast. I think maybe the other issue is, for us, we're trying to come out around 12%, 12.5%, 13%. We're right in that little zone. And that's right at the zone where you start to have problems. But if you're shooting for 11 or 12%, I've never had a problem. I wouldn't blame the fact that the yeast were wild. What I would blame is that there's not enough of them, right? The problem is typically that the yeast stop reproducing at a certain point, right? So, and that is also affected by the level of alcohol. So if you don't have enough yeast in the mass of the wine, when you hit that point, the yeast which are alive and can continue to produce alcohol but can't necessarily bud, they just kind of are just getting older. And if they don't finish, that's the problem. So really the way to solve that is to build up your yeast population early on in the process. And that's something I do have control over, or more control over now than I did when I started, where I was kind of more blind to like how many yeast I have. But I would say that if you want to get into doing yeast counts, it's really fun. You can get a microscope for probably $50 on eBay, and you get something called a hemocytometer, which is used for blood counts. And you put your yeast in there and you count them, and you can see how many you got. And you do it, and you do it the next day, and there's more of them, and you learn a lot right there. And you don't have to add anything to it, or yeah.
So if I'm kind of following you here, let's say where I'm on my walk, or this listener who posed this question is on his or her walk in through the neighborhood, and I pick up a dandelion, I pick up a spruce tip, I pick up a chunk of birch bark, and I throw that in a starter, and I build up a nice strong starter, and then I pitch that into my must. She's not going to have any problem hitting 12% ABV.
Well, I don't know, because my process is different than that. But also I would say that I know that people do this, and they like to get the yeast from particular flowers and things like that. I never do that. I'm almost entirely using yeast that comes on the honey. I feel like those are the yeasts that like to live on honey. They like to eat honey. That's why they're there. They're somehow alive because they can deal with whatever's going on with honey. And those are the yeasts that are going to ultimately take over the process. So you may start a starter with some flower yeast, but I don't know if they necessarily like honey or want to eat it or anything. I don't know what's going to happen there. The other thing is, I don't make a separate starter. I know this is a brewer's technique. They call this in winemaking pied de cuvée, I think. It's like the foot of the wine. When you make like a little batch and then you dump it in the big batch. But I don't do that mostly because my main concern, because I'm not using sulfur in the process, I'm not really worried about the yeast so much. I can build the yeast population up. I'm worried that it's going to get too lactic or too acidic or I'm going to get the VA problems. And meaning volatile acidity from vinegar making bacteria, right? That's your real enemy, because they're not an issue until there's alcohol. But you start making these like small batches of wine, or like you're building up a yeast population, let's say, and you've got like a little bit of alcohol in there. Like the vinegar bacteria love it when it's like 3 to 9% alcohol, right? Somewhere in there, 3 to 7% alcohol. That's like their zone. So you want to like get it out of that zone as fast as possible, because that's where the bacteria reproduce. So you may be reproducing yeast, but you also might just be growing a big bacterial load and then dumping that in your wine too. So I don't know. I would probably personally, I think it's a valid technique, but it's not one I use.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So,
Does that answer your question?
yes, absolutely. That was. I feel confident that I will not get yelled at anymore for not
Okay.
asking you the question properly.
Let me just reinforce one thing. The reason that I say that I get my yeast from my honey is because I know where my honey comes from and I know it's raw. Mm-hmm. You can't go and buy bulk Dutch honey and think this is going to work. It's not. That stuff's been pasteurized. It's been blended. I don't know where it came from. I don't know how long it's been sitting around. I don't know if it's got corn. I don't know what's going on there. So I get all my honey from a single farmer. I know what's going on there. Sometimes there's a little bit of bees in it. It's okay. But what I do know is that honey is never been cooked. And so I have like, sometimes it crystallizes and that's annoying, but I know that the yeast
how do you deal with that?
Are healthy.
How do you deal with
it?
Yeah, how do you deal with the crystallized honey? That's happened to me before too. How do you deal with it?
Well, I mean, look, it depends on the size of your bucket. You know, like I got 60-pound, 5-gallon buckets, right? Mm-hmm. For us, you know, if we're going to run, we'll probably do 10 or 12 of those. If they're crystallized, I mean, that's like our afternoon is like deep crystal. You know, we basically will fill up a cut down, I don't know what they're called. They're like blue barrels, you know, these HDPL, like food grade barrels. We have one of those that's like cut in half. So it's only like 3 feet deep or something. Mm-hmm. And we'll fill that up with hot water and put the bucket in there and sort of warm it up.
I see. Okay.
And then we switch them out. Also, we don't really need to totally liquefy them because they're going to get blended up when we add water to them, but we do need to get them out of the bucket. So we just need to get the outside done. But I think if you have a smaller amount, the word on the street is just to like boil some water, drop them in there, close it, and it'll get warm enough to melt the honey, but it won't get so hot it like sterilizes.
Cook it, you're right? You know? Yeah. Good point. I know that we've had questions about that in the past. I mean, people have always commented about, you know, what do you do with crystallized honey? You know, can you still make mead? Yeah, but you know, you kind of got to heat it up a little bit and get it back into that liquid form to really, you know, you mix it up well. You know, when you blend it in with your water and everything. So that's a good point. Point.
You know,
I've done it the lazy way. I'll admit.
What's that?
I get a lot of. I've had a lot of crystallized honey, and I do it just enough, you know, basically where I can get it out of the bucket, you know, and into the fermenter, and it's still in like a pretty crystallized state. And you know, I know pretty much, you know, how many pounds of honey I'm putting into how big the batch is, where the gravity is going to be. I'm not one of those guys who worries to the you know, the 4th or 5th decimal point on gravity. You know, I know pretty much where we're going to be, and that's good enough for me. So I've done that where I've had a pretty solid chunk of honey that goes into the fermenter, and you know, I've got the water in there, and you know, maybe I've tried a little bit to do it, but I'm not going to spend all afternoon on it, and just pitched, and it's worked out fine. I mean, the yeast has gone, the yeast and water have gone to work on it, and I didn't have any adverse problems. No, it's not something I do regularly, but I say that it's not gonna you're not gonna create a black hole in the universe by doing that.
Yeah, yeah. If you read some of these old mead recipes, you will find occasionally this reference to heating the mead up on purpose, actually, and then skimming it, right?
Yeah.
Because there's this foam that's produced, and I've been looking into what that is about, and I've learned that I'm sort of speculating on this, but talking to people, friends of mine who make pastries and candy professionally, and they also do this process sometimes with sugar and with honey. I think it's a way to remove the protein. So there's a huge amount of protein in honey wine and meads in general. And I think when you skim them, when you heat it and you skim that off, you're skimming the proteins off. And what does that do? It probably produces a clearer mead quicker, right? So a lot of these moves, at the end of the day, like these are all tricks to avoid having to age your mead and have it sort of like look like maybe you did or taste like maybe you did, even though you didn't. It's just like kind of different kinds of cheating.
Yeah.
If you just wait long enough, that stuff will sink and you can rack it off, right? That's what you're supposed to do. Easy. Right. But if you don't want to wait, this is one way to do it. Instead of using bentonite to clarify your mead or filtering it, which is a nightmare, you could heat the meat up, boil it, and skim the proteins off. You will, of course, destroy all the volatiles, most of the smells, and probably lots of the flavor, but your mead will be clear, at least, right?
Yeah. Guys, we're talking to Rafael Leon out in the city that Frank Sinatra made famous, New York. And I tell you what, Enlightenment Meads. Rafael, what's new in the meadery? Have you got anything new you're trying? Any new recipes? Anything coming up?
Okay, so we got two things coming up. Also, if you're googling me right now, it's Enlightenment Wine Meadery, and I know I apologize to everybody for this long title, but it's just been around for a long time, so we're stuck.
We'll get it right. We'll get it right. Thank you.
That's all right. But okay, so we have two things coming up. One, I think we've got the first successful sour pet nat style sparkling mead on the market. It's our third version of it. It's the bomb. It is really the bomb. It's one of the best things I've ever made. I do not try this at home. In fact, actually, try this at home. Actually, try this at home, and we'll have everyone try it, and then we'll have a roundup and a special award if anyone can pull this off. So this is a co-fermentation of lactic bacteria and yeast. So I'm not like it's not like a goose method of beer where you like make a sour beer and a regular beer and then you like blend some of the sour in.
Right.
Right. So this is important because the activity of both of these organisms fermenting at the same time produces this like war of chemistry between them. And that's what produces all the interesting flavors. So you have to do it at the same time. And then it goes into bottle. Then you have to do a secondary fermentation. That took a year. Just the secondary fermentation in the bottle took a year. The fermentation took a year. So it's 2 years old. We're about to release it at an affordable price of $30, but we don't have that much of it. But it's going to be delicious. I'm working also on right now. I'll send you a text of while you guys are talking. I was working on the label for the still version. We also have a non-sparkling version, and that's out. And then we are also releasing, probably in tiny, expensive bottles. I'm sorry, but we only made 2 barrels of it. There's a caramelized honey, a year in whiskey barrels. So it's really good. And also, I spent a really long time working on like advanced caramelization techniques because this is actually something that gets hard to do as you get bigger. Yeah. Right, because you have to heat up large amounts of honey.
Right.
And one of the things that I learned, if I give away my trade secrets, is that the caramelization process, which you can put sugar into a pan and heat it up, it'll brown. That's called the Maillard process. and it happens to meat, and it happens to all kinds of things. One of the interesting things about it is that it actually happens at all temperatures. It just happens slower. So you can actually caramelize honey over the course of a month if you want at like 85 degrees, you know?
Yeah.
Or you can do it in a day at 140 or whatever. So we did a very extremely long, very slow caramelization process that allows us to retain all the other flavors that we like without blowing them off. It's delicious. And we put it in some whiskey barrels, not very balanced. I'm not quite done with it. I think it needs like one more move, but yeah, hopefully we'll get that out in time for the holidays. But knowing me, because I'm a bad businessman, I will probably show up like January 4th or something when no one cares. And
you know, Ryan, we need a little bell to go off every time one of our guests drops a little nugget. You know, this whole thing about caramelization, I can hear the little bell going off in the back. Bing! That's the time to get out your pen and paper and write that down. You know, long-term caramelization produces good mead.
Well, it's more gentle, I'd say, a little softer, less burnt flavors.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that happens with the coffee. I mean, I haven't messed around with the coffee mead so much, but, you know, a lot of that, especially for me, I'm making dry mead. You know, it's hard to balance the, if you make this sweet, it's easy, you know, it'll taste great no matter what. But if you want it to be dry, you don't want it to also taste like just burnt, which is what it'll taste like if you're not careful, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Anything else, guys? Before we let Raphael go, I tell you.
Yeah, my bath is almost ready.
His bath. He warned us before the show that he had the warm bath running, and he was drinking lemon water. Warm lemon water. Oh my God.
Or hot lemon water.
Hot lemon water. Oh, Raphael, guy, I tell you what, you have got to come back on this show. Let's not make it 30 or 40 shows next time. What a kick, dude. I'm telling you, and I swear, if I ever get out to New York, I'm coming to your place. Not for a hot bath. I'm coming for the mead.
Yeah, me soup. Yeah, I'm going to put some flowers in there. Some me soup.
Oh, my God. Give a shout out to your website, where people can find your meads, to your address, to your birth date, whatever, dude.
Okay. Enlightenmentwines.com. That's us. Or Honey's Brooklyn. Either one gets you to the same website. That's our tasting room. And, yeah, we have a mead club. We just sent out a nice shipment. And we'll probably do another one in a month or two. Yeah, a lot of fun stuff going on there. We got Instagram under the same names, so just hit us up. And if you got questions, just DM me.
Awesome stuff, man. I'm telling you. Oh, my God. Raphael, it was so good talking to you again.
Thanks for the invite.
Hey, you bet. Hey, we'll do it again for sure. I'm telling you. If I have anything to do with it, we will put you back on the calendar again. Absolutely. Great. So a lot of fun. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Raphael Lyon, guys. What a kick out there in New York City, the city that Frank Sinatra made famous. I tell you, what a kick. The guy's a lot of fun, right, Ryan?
Oh, yeah. Great guy. Always fun talking to him. You know, you never know exactly where the conversation's going to go, but you're always happy it went that way.
Well, I'll tell you, for our listeners out there, I swear, I need to get like a little special effects console or something, and have a little binger dinger thing that goes off every time one of our guests drops a little nugget. Bing, bing, bing. Get out the pen and paper. I mean, this whole thing about caramelizing honey, Jeff. I mean, slow as you go. I mean, dude,
Well, and I have long advocated like slow cooker for your honey. Just set it on low, let it sit without a top on for 8 hours. Make your bread. Do food prep or whatever for 8 hours in that kitchen, and just keep an eye on it. But man, it sounds like he's taking an even lower and slower approach, which is Cool. I'm gonna have to look this this caramelized whiskey barrel aged mead stuff up because that
Ooh.
wow, this sounds right up my
Yes.
alley. man.
Yeah, me too, man. Anything, yeah, oh yeah, anything in a barrel. Oh yeah, absolutely. Hey, has anyone done a vegetable melomel? I've got pounds of carrots from my garden and an empty carboy. Is this madness or inspiration? I'll get to that in a minute. Yes, I had the opportunity to get my hands on the very last bottle of Mirepoix Melomel, I guess you call it, from Saphouse Meadery. I made a sauce out of it, and the stuff was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And so, is it madness or inspiration? Carrots, dude. Carrots have a degree of sweetness. I love carrot juice. It's good and sweet by nature. So I'm not sure where we're going with this, Ryan. Where'd that come from?
Well, this question was asked on somewhere. Let's just say it was a question that was asked. And I responded to this one because I did make a uh, a carrot mead, and
You did.
there are
I
a
remember.
lot
Yeah.
of carrot wine recipes out there.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like I was just talking about the elderberry syrup, carrot wines are a lot like a chili in that everybody does a little bit differently. It's
Yeah.
usually not just carrots. It's usually, carrots and this and that and the other thing. And so I talked about this in an episode, I don't know, a year or so ago, maybe more. But the carrot mead recipe I made was based on a carrot wine recipe that was an old newspaper in London, like 150 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And it was called carrot whiskey. And not in the sense that this is distilled, but in the sense that it had a coloring, I think, that reminded people of whiskey. And this one it was carrots and raw wheat, or that I had steeped in. And I think the recipe, had called for like lemons and oranges, and I used orange peels. And anyway, where I had found this one is Jack Keller, I think, was where I was originally directed, to that other recipe. But if you just search like Jack Keller carrot whiskey, you'll find that base recipe. And then I made some modifications. So where it says wheat, I used raw wheat from the homebrew store. Where it says lemons and oranges, I just used dried orange peel.
Mm-hmm.
Where it says raisins, I used yeast nutrient.
That's I was going to say raisins. That's a nutrient, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the best one on the market. And so I made some modifications, but yeah, you can make some really good carrot meads. I think carrots just love being with ginger. So I think that you could probably make a carrot ginger mead really well, and go from there. But yes, that was one that I had done. Now, I think it was Matt Whitey. The next time he's on the show, I'll have to ask him. But I think he wanted to make a tomato mead.
Oh,
which would be a melomel.
Yeah.
I suppose, because tomatoes are a fruit. And I've seen tomato wines. I've seen people make tomato wines, and I think they usually take like the overly ripe tomatoes that you don't really have much to do with, and they kind of throw them in their bucket and make a wine out of them. Mm-hmm. But I've heard that, and you ferment them on the skins. You do them right, that they come out very reminiscent of like a Cabernet,
Hmm.
and like body. The body is there and that kind of thing. I don't know if Matt ever made his, or if that's just something on his wish list, but um, I'd love to know, because I know that aside from the your carrot meat, or things like that, um, you can do tomatoes as well, which would
Uh,
be a lot better than you might think.
I think I mentioned this a couple of shows ago or last show or whatever, but my grandmother used to make tomato preserves. I mean, leftover tomatoes that were getting too soft in the refrigerator. I mean, she just put them in a big old pot and cook them down and add a bunch of sugar and pectin and whatnot and make tomato preserves. One of my dad's favorites on toast in the morning with a cup of coffee. I mean, so I've got this, and I had store bought tomato preserves. You can find them sometimes, usually in these little specialty shops and whatnot. And I often thought, wow, I wonder what this would be like in a mead. So tomatoes and carrots. I'm wondering about combining both of them, because I mean both that offer a degree of sweetness. Well, I love carrot juice, like I said. Back in the day when I was making my own juices in the morning with my little juicer deal, I mean carrots were always involved, and I just without putting any sweetener or anything in it, carrots was the one ingredient that gave my juice the sweetness, okay, that I was looking for. So I can see a carrot mead big time, Jeff. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a level of sugar present in carrot that that I think translates well to being a meat ingredient. I mean, we typically think of carrots as vegetables because they're not as sweet. They're more a savory thing. They grow on the ground instead of on a tree or a bush. But no, I think part of the reason that carrots are a staple vegetable for us is that they have a decent amount of sugar. They have a sweetness that people like. That kind of, it's not a pronounced sweetness like in fruit, but it's there. And absolutely, yeah, I would definitely try it. Like Ryan said, there are a number of flavors that just seem to go nicely with carrots. Whether I could see using raisins as a flavoring agent instead of a nutrient source, to be honest, because that little bit of the grapiness and the kind of that dried the dark fruit flavor that you get from raisins sometimes. I think that will go nicely with it. The other vegetable, so to speak, that comes to mind as being really sweet, Vidalia onion.
Oh God, yeah. Well, oh hell yeah, or Maui onion. Oh hell yeah.
I'm not sure that onion plus carrot equals good mead, but each independent of each other might be worth a try. So
Well,
there's, like I've said so many times before, mead is one of those beverages that it does not have a history like wine or beer. That we have these regional versions and these different varieties and things like that are kind of like classic styles, and I think that's both to its benefit and to its detriment. In this case, it's to its benefit because we're still kind of just playing around and figuring out what mead can be. And I think in this case, a carrot mead and onion mead, these are viable options for us
you know,
until somebody tries it and proves me wrong.
well, yeah. I mean, yeah. And who says we have to make mead to drink? I mean, I mentioned before that I got one of the last bottles, well, actually the last bottle of Mirepoix mead from Sap House Meadery. Ash was kind enough to send it to me. And one of his employees used to love to drink it. I mean, if you understand what a mirepoix is, it's basically vegetables. I mean, it's common in soups and sauces and whatnot. Carrots, onions, celery. Sauteed down in some butter. You can throw some garlic in if you want. But it's basically made for cooking. And I made this sauce out of this mirepoix that was just freaking heavenly. I mean, I put it in a saucepan and cooked it down, reduced it down more than half, probably by 2/3. Add a little bit of butter, tossed in some onion, and a little bit of fresh garlic, and I had it over chicken and mashed potatoes, and the shit was awesome, dude. I mean, who says you have to make mead to drink? You know, I mean, you can cook with this stuff too. I think we've talked about that before on this show.
Sometimes, sure.
Yeah. So, but let's take it up another notch here. What about stuff that we have done in the past that were a little intimidating? Okay. All right. So it's JD's turn, right? Okay. The pumpkin mead. Really, you really want to talk about that? Now we're going way back. Okay, you gotta go way back in the beginning of the show. We've got a couple of listeners who are actually starting out in like the very beginning. That's almost like 4 years ago. Okay, you'll learn about JD's. If you're a new listener, go back and find where we're talking about JD's pumpkin mead. I'm not going to explain all that, rehash all that. But anyway, the pumpkin mead, no, that's like a no-brainer. I'm not doing that. No, that's one that intimidates the crap out of me. All right, since then, I've made somewhat, I won't call it pumpkin mead, but I'll call it like a pumpkin braggot, okay? But all it really entailed was zero pumpkin, but lots of pumpkin spice. Okay, so it's like a subliminal thing. I mean, really, what gives pumpkin pie its pumpkin flavor? The spices, right? I mean, take a big. I'll tell you what. Go to the store and buy some organic pumpkin pie filler. All right, and before you do anything to it, just put a big old tablespoon in there and just dig you out a big old spoon of it and put it in your mouth, and then email me and tell me what you think about it. Okay, I'll stop right there. Ryan, is there anything that you've been intimidated by that you think, maybe we should try this again?
One that I don't feel like I've ever really nailed is a bochet.
Mm-hmm.
And I've made some okay bocets, but never really felt like I just nailed it. And intimidation might not be the right word for it, but it's that it's definitely the most it's definitely the lot. There's more time involved, there's more steps involved, and potentially it can be a little bit more difficult to cover if you make a mistake. So I'd say that I've been hesitant to really try another bochet lately.
Yeah. I get that. That's one that I feel kind of intimidated by. I've caramelized honey in the past, and I like it. I've caramelized it from. I mean, let's do like from a 1 to 5. Okay, I've done it from a 1 to 5. Okay, I like it around a 3. Okay, that marshmallowy, it's got a really nice aroma and really lots of character. And to me, Jeff, when it gets beyond like a 4, it's like, okay, here comes all those burnt caramel smells, and I'm thinking, ooh, God, this may not be what I'm looking for, type of thing. So I get the whole bochet thing, but is there anything in your list of meads that you have felt intimidated in the past by, and kind of taking a second thought about it? Maybe you want to try it again.
Well, actually, the part of the reason I suggested this one, dusted this comment off, was I'm inclined to try a coffee mead. We had.
You had to go there, right? You had to go there, right?
it was going to happen eventually. I'm not the type of person to say, I didn't like this. I didn't do this really well. I'm just going to leave this alone and never do a coffee mead. It was bound to come up. I would have to revisit it eventually. And, I got to thinking a while back, like, well, the coffee mead is not necessarily what I envisioned it to be in the finish versus like what I envisioned it to be at the start and what I got at the end, and what I've had since then as far as coffee meats go has not been. There's a dissonance there, but that's not necessarily bad. That's just me like having unreasonable expectations, I think. So what I know now and what I've learned in the process, this is how we grow as mead makers. We try stuff, it doesn't necessarily work out, and we either go, okay, well, I'm not going to do that anymore, or okay, well, learn from that and let's try something different.
Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, the guys over at Sap House are doing these higher grounds, and was it Amaro Gallo we had initially? I think from them, we've got some really good coffee meats from them, and I don't know that I'm necessarily going to replicate that all that well. I could try the amount of experimentation they've probably done to get to where they are putting out really good coffee meats on a commercial scale, but that's a lot of work. So what I'm thinking of,
it gives you a roadmap, though, right? It gives you kind of a roadmap.
And let's not discount the fact that Ash and Evan have given us a ton of good advice over their many guest segments on the show, because they have. And I will definitely use the whole idea of different grinds at different times, and kind of my not complete but partial under of what they're going through there to inform how I'm adding the coffee to this mead. But just a straight up coffee mead, I don't think I want to try that. I think I want to try flavors that will go with coffee. So it's coffee and something else.
Yeah.
And for a little bit, I was considering a coffee and cardamom mead, like a Turkish coffee. I don't know if you guys have ever had. Yeah.
I've had that.
Yeah. My wife and I like to go to a little Turkish bakery, and we'll get the Turkish coffee and some baklava, and it's a not sweet but very nice dessert. So that has a special spot in my heart. By the same token, I kind of got to thinking, wow. So the coffee component, Turkish coffee, and then for some reason I thought of Turkish Delight, which is it's a candy. It's kind of like a gummy candy, like flavored with rose water and pistachio, if I'm not mistaken. So like, wow. What if I throw in coffee and rose hips, which I happen to have a few of? Could that be good? And I think if I go on a little bit more sweet side to balance the acidity of both the coffee and the rose hips, that might be worth exploring. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, I have definitely been sitting here for a couple of years like, man, coffee mead. Don't want to do that again, but I need to.
Yeah.
But, as I think about this more, I think part of this is just finding a way to approach it and not let what I perceived years and years ago as kind of like a failure or a setback really stop me. So, that's my 2 cents there.
Well, I'm kind of the same way with the pumpkin mead thing. I mean, everybody knows. I mean, if you go back and listen to the early segments of or early episodes of the Mead House, you'll discover JD's pumpkin mead fiasco. Where I proclaimed never again. But I wouldn't mind a revisit now that I have a little better understanding of what the pumpkin actually does to the mead versus what the spices do. To me, pumpkin mead isn't about the pumpkin, it's more about the spices. I mean, after all, like I said, if you take a can of pumpkin pie filling and just get a big old spoonful and put it in your mouth. Email me and tell me what you really think about it. Okay. We're not talking about a bite of cooked pumpkin pie here. We're talking about the crap that goes in the pie shell before you cook it. Okay, take a good mouthful and tell me what you think. You really think you want to make a meat out of that? Give me a break. But understanding now,
Starbucks has put 0 of that in their lattes, but they're still selling a crap load of the pumpkin spice latte.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's all about the spice. Okay, when you get down to it, it's all about the spice. Okay, and you can customize the spices, to your liking. I mean, who's to say that pumpkin pie spice has to have a certain amount of cinnamon and all these various other spices in with it? So, but the pumpkin itself, okay, to me adds a degree of mouthfeel. Okay, that creamy sensation that you get when you eat a good, nicely baked pumpkin pie, like my grandmother's pumpkin pie. It was just this creamy, delightful thing with the whipped cream on top. I mean, it tasted good. So something along that lines, yeah, I can see that in a mead, mimicking those kinds of mouthfeels and those spices. The coffee mead thing, for my, the only decent coffee mead that I love making Kahlua. I make homemade Kahlua all the time, and I make several different versions of it. And maybe if I think about it before the end of the show, I'll put one of my recipes up on the show notes for my Kahlua. Um, Sometimes I use orange spices. I'll use vanillas. I primarily use an espresso powder, one particular brand that I found that works the best, and I've made this stuff time and time and time again. And I have settled upon one brand of espresso powder that really works good. And the one coffee mead that I did make that I really liked was more along that line, more like a Kahlua than a coffee mead. Now it was good. I mean, you could pour it in a cup of coffee. You could make a cocktail out of it. I mean, it wasn't something that you would pour in in a glass and drink. It wasn't that kind of a mead. I mean, it was very thick, very sweet, very coffee-like, very espresso-like, and nothing that would want to pour in a wine glass, and drink, a couple of ounces of. That just wasn't that kind of a meat, but it was tasty. I loved it, and so did my neighbors. My wife loved it, and everything else. So, but anyway, yeah, some things that intimidate us. Good segment, guys. Willing to retry some of the things that we've tried in the past and never was able to put it together. This is the time and show where we like to have some fun with our social club. And before we get started, I got an email from Dan Weston, and the subject matter of his email was mead recipes. And this is a message from him, quote, I am just getting into mead making and have recently discovered your podcast. Thanks, Dan. And I'm sharing I'm starting from the beginning. I am very far behind where your podcast episodes currently stand. One question that I have at this time is that you keep mentioning that that we're able to locate the recipes on your website. Every time I try locating in recipes, I'm unable to find them. Is there something I'm doing wrong to find these recipes? No, you're not doing anything wrong, Dan. We made a decision several years back to take down the recipes off of our website. The reason being, we did not want to be a recipe repository. We felt here on the show that there were plenty of other websites out there for you to find recipes out there for meads. And we would rather you come to themeadhouse.com to want to listen to our show. I apologize for the early episodes. We didn't know at that time that we were going to make this decision later, but we did. that being said, I do want to point you into some of the more recent episodes where we do talk about making meads for new people. Start simple, okay? 3.5 pounds per gallon of honey for your water. Find a good yeast. We recommend 71B to start out with. Throw your nutrients in up front if you wish. You can start with the Tosna. We do recommend that. You can look that up on Google. There's plenty of websites out there that'll explain the whole Tosna aspect to you. Start there, okay, and make your first mead that way. And when you have successfully made several batches of mead in that respect that you really enjoy, then come back and start listening to some of the later episodes of the show. We do talk about flavors. One of the sponsors of the Iron Bee, Amaretti.com, tons of flavors available. And each one of us here on the show have used their products and have made some really fantastic flavored meads with it. So I'll leave it at that, guys. Social Club, one of the ones that we didn't get to last week, Ryan, I think this one might be up your alley. Are scratch buckets or plastic carboys still usable? I understand that there's a risk of various icky things hiding in the scratches, but I was wondering how dangerous it was. I have a 2 gallon bucket and a 1 gallon fur monster. I used a metal spoon in and scratched both of them. Are they junk or can they be used as bottling aids? Are liquids put into them immediately infected? Or actually, this might even be a Jeff question. We'll start out with Ryan. Or is it the long exposure that makes scratches dangerous? I don't care about the bucket, but fur monsters aren't cheap. Brian, take a stab at that, dude.
Okay, so you guys know if you've listened to any amount of our podcasts that I'm on the frugal end. I'm more of a frugal mead maker here, and
Cheap. In other words, cheap.
Value driven.
Value driven.
And so I do try to stretch the dollar, but you can end up by being cheap, you can actually get very expensive. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Let's say you do have a scratched bucket or something, and you weren't able to clean it properly. You weren't able to get your sanitizer into all the little nooks and crannies, or where some of the little bugs are hanging out. And then you put in 5 pounds of honey or 10 pounds of honey and some flowers, let's say some flowers, some dried rose petals or something that's expensive. And you end up with a $60 batch of meat here. Well, if that goes south because something went wrong, you didn't anticipate having some kind of bug in there, it's not what you want. By trying to save a couple of bucks on the bucket, you just cost yourself $80 to 60 or $80 in ingredients plus an afternoon. So being cheap can end up being very expensive. So going back to being frugal, it's I've fermented in plastic buckets for a while. I've fermented in I use those I don't even know what they're called, big mouth bubblers.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. I fermented those. I've gone through a few of those. It's you can buy a nice stainless steel fermenter. Absolutely. I tried out when those came out. I don't even know what the conicals. One of these conicals, not the ones that are around now. It was around for a while. It was like a big ball. It's like a circular conical, and I had to send that back because that wasn't working right. I do this for you. I do this for you. I try to test these things out, you the listener. But um, I'd say the best way to be frugal is to find something that works, not just in efficiency, but also in time. Does it save you time? Does it work well? And and then if it's time to go, just get rid of it and buy another one. Thomas Eibner, a national mead maker of the year at least once, if not more, um, is ferments in buckets. And he says, look, I can buy a food grade plastic bucket for like $5.
Yeah.
If I've had a bucket that's even been sitting around too long, if I look at it and say, hey, it's been sitting there too long, I'll just go buy a new bucket. I'm not gonna chance risk a batch of mead because I wouldn't go buy a bucket.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna tell them that. I'm gonna start with that. I just frugal is okay, but cheap can get expensive. And as far as the scratches and things inside there, you can try. You can throw Star San in water and let it sit for a while, and if liquid can get into those scratches or those little nooks and crannies, then it's carrying the sanitizer should be carrying the sanitizer with it. And if that's the gamble you want to take, then go for it. Try it out, and best luck to you. Or if you just don't want to risk, $60 in ingredients on a $5 scratch bucket, go buy a new one.
Yeah, Jeff, one thing that I've advocated is not using dish soap when you wash out your bucket. I always use the bad thing about dish soap is it leaves a film, and that's really hard to get out. I always use PBW to wash everything. It's a beer, common in the beer beer brewing industry.
Right.
Bars, I mean, every bar that I know uses PBW to clean out their beer lines and everything. So, you're the scientist among us. So, I mean, scratches in a bucket. How dangerous are they?
So let's talk about a couple different kinds of scratches first. There's you talk about a Fermonster, which is essentially it's a clear plastic thing. If you're using any kind of a scrubby or any kind of an abrasive pad to kind of just clean the junk off of your plastic, there's a chance you're going to get some kind of what I would call superficial scratches. They're essentially, it makes the plastic look a little cloudy, if you will. That to me is not the biggest risk. The risk that you really want to avoid, and it sounds like this question, the questioner, the asker, however we want to call them, is really concerned with, are more like gouges, where you've got a metal implement like a spoon, and you've got kind of just a scrape on the inside. The reason that this is potentially a problem is that you can get some biofilm or some growth or something in there that is more difficult for a standard cleaning regimen to remove. I mean, your scrubby goes over that scrape; it doesn't get into the little divot there. A high pressure wash may not hit the right angle, so you can get just a little bit of film or bioculture, something like that, hanging out in there over the long term. That it's a perfect spot for bacteria to grow. He questioned whether or not it was still useful for, say, like a bottling process or something like that, because they're not cheap. I would say no. I would say, think about, you guys are familiar with the 5-second rule, right? You drop food and
yeah.
seconds to pick it up. If you drop a banana slice on the floor, does the 5-second rule still apply? Because to me, no.
No.
Like if I drop an M&M on
Hell
the floor,
no.
something solid, I go, okay, 5-second rule. If I drop a banana slice or something that's a little wet, no, that's just going in the trash because that's terrible.
Yeah.
I think the same thing applies to mead. You know, any potential conflict, any potential contact, you're too risky. So my process, you know, I like the 6.9 or 7-gallon like plastic buckets. If I remember right, those go for about $30 at the brew shop. The 7-gallon for Monsters probably go for a little bit more than that, maybe 36, 38. So no, they're not cheap. You don't want to go replacing them very much. This is kind of one of those live and learn things where, yeah, no, you might have messed it up. What I usually do, what my process is that like I'll hold on to the most recent one that's looking a little funky and use that for star sanding bottles or whatever I do in my process to get labels and crud out of the bottle or whatever I need to do to get those ready to brew. That's just that vessel's thing. And then when I get a new one, I replace the old one and it kind of just cycles out. You know, those go to the recycle bin and that's that.
Yeah.
End of the day, $30, $38. It's kind of a lot to just drop indiscriminately if you're not, you know, really thinking about it. But easily, let's take the cheapest honey you can get. Let's go Costco honey. Like you can buy 5 pounds of that, you know, super blended Argentine and U.S. honey for $10. And if you're doing a 5-gallon batch, you're easily putting 3 of those into a 5-gallon batch. So we're talking about $30 versus $30.
Yeah, this takes me all the way back to the very beginning of the show. I mean, you'll hear me talk about. I was really anal about this whole cleanliness thing. I mean, I was spraying down the ceiling, the walls, the countertops. I was decontaminating everything, dude. You know, short of wearing a surgical gown. I mean, my kitchen, I mean, you could eat off the freaking floor, you know. Hey, good answers. Go ahead.
If you're starting out, maybe that's not a terrible idea to be a little overprotective.
Yeah.
As you get more comfortable with this, you have your processes. You narrow down your workspace and what you do. You're better at maintaining that. Okay, well, I just put the stirrer in. I stirred it up. I need to add more honey. So, you know, you set that stirrer somewhere where it's not going to touch anything else and become contaminated again. So you don't need to go back and do the whole thing again. You know, this is learning a process. And sometimes you screw up and use a metal spoon in a plastic bucket and it winds up costing you a little extra. And that sucks. But
not
if
that,
you want good stuff.
Yeah, not that my ceiling had anything to do with the taste of my mead, but hell, we're going to drop it right there for the night. We just flat run out of time. But hey, coming up on the next show, which will be in 2 weeks, don't forget, we'll be on 2 weeks hiatus here. Coming up when we return, I really want to dig into a couple of these social interactions here. Social club. One is about oaking. That's kind of right up our alley here at the Mead House. The other one actually comes from Hawaii, Jeff. This is from Limi 9V2 Tropical Ingredients. I'm a mead maker on the Big Island of Hawaii. I've been brewing for 2 to 3 years. So newish. Been working through all of the kavikis in different combinations of local honeys. Hey, more to come when we return in 2 weeks. So, hey, we're going to drop it right there for tonight. Hey, Rafael Leon, dude, I tell you what, you made the show tonight. I'm telling you. Last here on episode 166, I believe it was, that I put in my show notes. But big thanks to Rafael from Enlightenment for showing up here tonight, hanging out with us in this episode. We'll put all the links up to his meadery in the show notes. Make sure you check him out. He's got a mead club. Make sure you join. and get after some of the products that he puts out there. But hey, we do want to know what you're brewing too. You can email us info@themeadhouse.com, or just send us a message on the Facebook deal or Twitter. Both of those at the Mead House. So hey, in the meantime, happy mead making. That's it for this episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Hey, Ryan, flip the lights off. Jeff, slam the door shut. Hey, we'll be back in a couple of weeks with episode, 181 of the Mead House. We're gone.